What is up, guys? It's your boy Steady Chaos. Thank you for stopping by Steady Chaos Productions. So it has been a hot minute since I have done an LG C10 picture setting video. So I want to kind of go back to my roots and put out one of these LG C10 picture setting videos for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I've been playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare quite a bit the last week or two. It's been a long time. I had gone probably a good 6 or 7 months without touching this game, and I had been playing a lot of single player games, and I was like, you know what, I want to get back into some competitive multiplayer. So I started playing Modern Warfare on the PlayStation 4 Pro. I recently posted a gameplay video, some TDM, Team Deathmatch in Modern Warfare, to my channel, and I will leave a link in the description below for you to check that out. I'm a little bit rusty, but I am starting to shake the rust off. So I've kind of honed in my settings for competitive multiplayer on Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Now, keep in mind, these settings are not going for accuracy. In previous videos I've released for certain games in LG C10 picture settings, I always tell people that a lot of the times these settings aren't necessarily going for accuracy. A lot of times the settings are going to accentuate a certain game's art style or design, or in this instance, I'm going for maximum visual clarity for Team Deathmatch and for competitive gameplay. So any of those campers that might be hiding in a shadow or crouched somewhere in the darkness, you can pick them out, you can spot them, and you can kill them, as opposed to them, you know, being able to hide on you or sneak up on you or whatnot because your screen settings are too dark, or you're going for maximum visual fidelity and not maximum clarity. These settings seek to eliminate dark shadows, dark corners, to make visibility the priority, to make clarity of enemies the priority, okay? Anybody who's a purist out there, anybody who says, oh, you shouldn't be adding sharpness to a 4K television with over 8 million pixels, you're just bringing out lines that aren't even, just honestly, keep your comments to yourself if you're going to be negative, or just get off my channel and go somewhere else and be a troll, because quite frankly, I don't want to deal with anybody's bullshit. And if I see any comments on here that are just completely nonsensical and are just being rude for the sake of being rude, or just being bitter for the sake of being negative, I'm going to delete your comment, and that's that. I'm just not going to engage or deal with trolls. So just relax, okay? These are picture settings, they're subjective. I'm just sharing my settings with you. Maybe they'll help you, maybe they won't. If they don't help you, that's totally fine. No problem. If they do help you, great. All right, so with that said, let's jump in first things first to the PlayStation picture settings. So you go to settings, you go to sound and screen, video output settings. So your resolution, you can just set that to automatic. If you have a 4K display, the PlayStation 4 will automatically select the proper display depending on whether or not you're playing SDR. If you're playing 4K SDR games, it'll pick 2160p RGB. If you're playing 4K HDR games, it'll pick 2160p YUV 420. And HDR automatic, that's fine. Deep color output automatic. You can adjust or calibrate your HDR for the best possible display. I would recommend you do that, especially with a game like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where we're going to be using HGig HDR. You could probably set your TV to HGig, and then you could adjust your HDR from there. That way you'll get the best possible HDR representation in game. Now, because you are playing an HDR game, you're going to want your RGB range to be limited. You can also set it to automatic, which would most likely select the correct setting here, which is limited. But I didn't want to take any chances, so I just set it to limited. So I'd recommend everything else automatic is fine, and then just set to limited. So video output information would look as such: 3840 by 2160p with Call of Duty running at 60 Hz in HDR for YUV 420 color. Okay, so that's what we expect. So this game looks great. This is a very high quality looking game. It is a game that is rendered below 4K, but is upscaled to 4K quality and runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second with no hiccups or hitches. It's really smooth on the PS4 Pro. But like I said, I play competitively. I play Team Deathmatch. Whatever you play, if it's competitive, if it's Warzone, if it's Search and Destroy, if it's Capture the Flag, any of these settings, my picture settings, I feel like would apply. So if you are using the LG C10 or C9 or B10, these settings probably also would apply to your screen. So, general, all these AI functions, again, I have off. The less AI functions you have engaged, the less picture processing you have engaged, then the less latency or lag you will experience when playing, which is what you want. You don't want a lot of latency, you don't want a lot of lag, because then that makes the inputs on your screen slower, that makes your reaction time slower. So let's go to picture. So obviously picture mode settings, we're in game, we're in 16:9 aspect ratio. We don't want energy saving on because that dims the screen. Additional settings, make sure HDMI deep color is on. Make sure instant game response is on. AMD FreeSync Premium doesn't matter because the PlayStation 4 does not use FreeSync. And filmmaker mode auto change, just leave that off. Eye comfort mode up here too, leave that off. OLED screensaver, you can leave logo luminance adjustment to low. I would not really recommend you set it to high because according to rthings.com, when you set logo luminance adjustment too high, that can negatively impact the brightness of your OLED display. So just keep it on low. All right, and so to get into the nitty-gritty HDR picture mode, we're in game. Like I said, OLED light 100, contrast 100. Now, like I've said in many of my other picture setting videos for games and HDR movies, if you can, ideally you will set your OLED light and your contrast to 100 when in high dynamic range mode. By setting both of these, OLED light and contrast to 100, you maximize your TV's HDR performance. You make sure specular highlights are nice and bright, and that's when you get the best contrast. Brightness is 50 by default. I just leave it there. Sharpness, typically I set it somewhere between 5 and 10. I don't go too crazy with sharpness, but with a game like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, you want to make sure you have maximum visibility. You want to make sure you can be able to see at distance. So that is why here I turn the sharpness up just a little bit. I find that that helps me pick out enemies, especially at range. And especially if an enemy is in tan camo and they're against a tan background, I feel like having a little bit of additional sharpness helps to bring out those enemies, helps to expose their outline a little bit. Again, this is subjective, and I'm not telling you you should use 20 sharpness, and I'm not even saying 20 sharpness is the correct value. Most likely, if you want a more correct value, you would set it somewhere between 0 and 10, probably 5-ish. Once you get over 10 or 15, you can start enhancing some of the edges of the image on the screen, which is basically what sharpness is. It's edge enhancement. And you can add, if you get a little bit too carried away with the sharpness, you can add some ringing effect to your picture. You can add a little bit of noise. But Call of Duty Modern Warfare is such a clean, crystal clear picture to begin with. It has very little noise that I find pushing the sharpness up to around 20, even 25 in some instances, it doesn't really penalize you with too much ringing, with too much static, with too much noise. And like I said, it brings out your enemies pretty nicely in the background. So 20 sharpness is where I have it set. Color 52. 55 is the default setting with HDR gaming. I find that with this game, I like to try, especially in competitive multiplayer, when everything is about responsiveness, when everything is about clarity, I'd like to keep the color down a little bit towards 51 or 52 to keep things sort of neutral. I don't want the image to start getting overly colorized or overly fruity, because then it can just become a little bit more difficult, in my opinion, to pick out enemies, especially against colorful backdrops. So keeping it closer to around 50, 51, the color, I feel like that keeps the screen a little bit more neutral and a little bit easier for me, personally, to read. Alright, tint is 0. I don't ever touch that. Advanced controls. Dynamic contrast I have off, although I'm torn between off and low. One good thing about having it set to low is it brightens up the screen just a little bit. You can see the difference here. Off, low, off, low. And by brightening up the screen a little bit with it set on low, some of the shadow areas, you brighten those images up a little bit as well. So if you have a camper standing in a doorway or a shadowy area, having the contrast on low, pumping up the brightness a little bit, will help to expose that enemy. Yes, it is probably not the most accurate setting. You really don't need to add dynamic contrast, technically speaking, to an image that already has high dynamic range. It's an artificial metric. You're artificially pumping up the low-end brightness of your display. So it's not an accurate picture setting per se. I acknowledge that. But again, like I said in my intro, I'm not going for accuracy here. I'm going for max clarity and I'm going for max competitiveness with Team Deathmatch in Call of Duty, okay? So I find setting the dynamic contrast too low helps to brighten up those shadow areas. So we'll just leave it on low there. Now, dynamic tone mapping, HGig is the way to go with this game. A lot of games are not programmed with HGig in mind. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is one of the few games that is specifically programmed to take advantage of HGig. And this game looks absolutely brilliant in HGig. It really does. That said, if you find HGig to be a little bit too dim, which I don't think you will, it is really nice and bright, but if you do find it to be a little bit too dim, you can always use dynamic tone mapping, which will really pump up the brightness here. Ready? 3, 2, 1, bam. You can see that this screen got insanely bright here with dynamic tone mapping on. I find HGig to be the most pleasing display and to offer me great visibility. And like I said, this game was developed with HGig in mind, so that is why I recommend you keep it on HGig. Let's take a look up at the sun here, see the difference between HGig and on. So on, HGig. Off, HGig. Off, on. Bam. On is really bright, I'm not going to lie. But HGig is where it's at. Now, if you wanted that added visibility for shadow areas, certainly. Let's take a look at a shadow area right here, this doorway. Turn it to on. It really does pump up the brightness pretty nicely. I think it makes this interior section of the doorway a little bit more visible, a little easier to see with dynamic tone mapping on. And some people might find dynamic tone mapping to be honestly too bright, especially if they're playing their OLED at a relatively close distance of say 4 or 5 feet away in a pitch black room. They might get themselves a headache. So HGig, it's where it's at. Okay, so super resolution off. I don't use it. Wide color gamut is what I have it set to here. We are playing this game in high dynamic range, therefore you want to have a wide color gamut engaged. You could go with auto, but I use wide just to make sure that the TV is displaying the P3 color gamut, which HDR games are mastered in. So set it to wide. White balance, if you want to be technically correct and you want to go with the right color temperature, you're probably going to go with warm 1 or warm 2. But again, like I said, with my color setting, keeping it closer to 50, which is a neutral setting, you're playing a competitive multiplayer game. You want to make sure your visibility is nice and clear. You want to make sure that your image is neutral. Warm just makes things, especially warm 2, it makes things a little bit too yellow, and it just makes, especially on a desert map like this, it makes everything kind of blend together, almost look uniformly yellowish red. It's just too much. So I think that medium does a good job keeping everything kind of neutral, and it breaks up the color a little bit, you know? The red in this wall comes out a little bit more. The white in this building shows a little bit more against the yellow mountainous background. It just helps to differentiate the colors. It helps to improve visibility, in my opinion. So I keep it at medium. And then I have blue -12. So medium, red 0, green 0, blue -12. OLED panels, like I've said in the past, they tend to run really on the blue side by nature, so by setting blue -12, you kind of cut back on that excessive blue color a little bit, and you also do your eyes a little bit of a favor because excess blue light can give you headaches and can strain your eyes. Color management, I don't touch. Peak brightness is grayed out, it's automatically on high in HDR gaming. And then into picture options, noise reduction, MPEG noise reduction, smooth gradation, I don't use any of these. I don't find any of these functions really do much to the image. I don't really find that they help or hurt the image. And by engaging all of these additional processing features like noise reduction, like MPEG noise reduction, and like smooth gradation, you just increase the chances that you will have more latency because you are adding picture processing. So I would highly recommend you leave these 3 functions off. Now this is going to be the controversial setting, okay? Remember, I'm not going for accuracy in this instance. I'm going for maximum visibility, okay? So if you have a game in HDR, then your RGB range in the PlayStation 4 settings, like we looked at earlier, is going to be limited, or it should be set to limited. When that happens, your black level should be set to low. That is a correct setting. So whatever your RGB range is set at in your PlayStation 4, in this instance, because we're playing an HDR game, it is at limited. Then you want a corresponding black level setting in your TV, which should be low. Similarly, if you have a full RGB range in your PlayStation 4 settings, then you would want to set the corresponding black level in your LG C10 to high down here, okay? That means that both the TV and the PlayStation 4 will be operating on the same darkness and brightness scale, and that means that you will have the correct image displayed on the screen. You won't have crushed blacks, and you won't have a blown out picture. However, this game, like I said, we're going for visibility here, maximum visibility. And what is the biggest problem in this game when you play Team Deathmatch or you play competitively online? What do people do? They run in the corner and they do one of these things. They hide. And then they wait for somebody to run through the doorway and then they pick them off. You know, a lot of the times if somebody's hiding in a corner like this, it's dark. The shadowy silhouette of their body will not show up against the dark background, and they're pretty much cloaked. So somebody can run in here and run right past them and not see them, and they make themselves an easy target. So what I'm recommending, and again, technically this is an incorrect picture setting, but that's okay, because this is our TV. We can do whatever the hell we want with it, right? Look at this corner right here. See what's kind of dark? You can't really see very well in there. Somebody could be ducked right in this corner, and you would have a hard time picking them out if you ran through here, okay? So, right now, we have an RGB range of limited in the PlayStation 4, and we have the black level correctly set to low. Usually, the TV can automatically diagnose the correct black level based on the source input. So if I set auto, the black level will stay the same. See, nothing changed on the screen. The TV is correctly selecting low when it's on auto, okay? What I'm recommending you do for maximum visibility is intentionally blow out your image to some degree so that you can improve visibility in these shadowy areas of maps. And there are a lot of shadowy areas. You could set it to high right here. Bam. Now you see how visibility inside here increased and improved? This area became more visible. The walls and the shadowy areas became more visible. So low, high. So when you're on low, look at this area right here. You see the shelving? When I switch to low, that shelving becomes much more difficult to pick out right in this area. When you go back to high, it becomes immediately visible. It's much easier to see. And by washing out your image like this a little bit, by setting your black level to high, you're not destroying the aesthetic. You know, you're not destroying the overall image. It still looks great, you know? This is still a very, very pleasing image. But what you're doing is you're making it easier to see. So look right here, we're back in low. Now you see, if somebody was laying in this cave opening and you came running around the corner, you're not gonna see them. You're not gonna see them right away. They're gonna have the read on you. You're gonna be dead, okay? Let's try switching this to high, okay? See that? See how it just became much easier to see? Let's move the reticle out of the way. Low, high, low. This area right here, which is really dark, this brightens up on high, high. You see that? You can see the ground in here now. Everything brightens up nicely. So these shadowy areas of various maps, especially if you play on realism mode and then you play on nighttime versions of these maps with night vision and laser sights, your visibility will be so much better by setting your RGB range in HDR to limited and your black level to high. I know it's incorrect, okay? So anybody who is just itching to send me a negative comment on the message boards, don't bother, because I know this is incorrect, okay? But it helps visibility. So low, high. So obviously by having it set to low, you can see that there's better contrast in the image. Overall, the screen pops more. It is slightly more visually appealing, absolutely. I will not fight you on that point. But by setting it to high, you can just see so much better in dark areas. You have much better visibility. The only negative of that is really bright areas like this right here, they will look a little bit more blown out. So let's go back to low in this area here. See? The surrounding areas get a little bit darker. The colors and the saturation of the colors improves a little bit by having your black level on low. Putting it back to high though, You can see it's a little bit flatter, the image, but it's not to the point where you're like, man, this looks like trash. No, it's not like that at all. And you get the added benefit of being able to see your opponents that much better. So that is why I recommend you set your RGB range in HDR to limited and your black level to high. Obviously, if you're playing a single player game and, you know, reaction time and maximum visual clarity are not your objective, rather you want a game that is set accurately and has the most pleasing image, then of course you would want to set your black level to low and your RGB range to limited. Okay, that's fine. But this is Modern Warfare, this is competitive gaming. This is why I set it to my black level to high. The rest of the settings are all off. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You don't really want to use true motion black frame insertion because what you're going to be doing is crushing your blacks and you're going to be introducing shadows again. So look at this. Look at black level on high. So, I mean, yes, the movement looks really smooth and nice, which is great. I do appreciate how the motion resolution improves, but the screen gets so dark. That dark areas like this that we looked at before. So even by having a black level set to high, these areas still become too dark with BFI engaged. And if I were to set it to low, look at how dark the screen gets. Good luck spotting anybody in shadowy corners. You are totally screwed. So black level back to high and black frame insertion, even though, yes, it really does improve motion, it's just at the cost of brightness. It's you can't overcome dimming of the image that OLED Motion Pro or black frame insertion causes. So medium, low, and off. The screen gets nice and bright. So with that said, let me know how these picture settings work out for you, or if they don't work for you, let me know. And if you have your own picture settings which you feel are superior to this in terms of visibility, please do share. I would like to try them out myself. Alright guys, if you like this video, leave a like and leave a comment down below, and also please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and we will see you guys real soon with more content. Later.